I would like to start by asking you all some questions. And the questions will be, you can put them in the chat, and then Kate will read them to me because I can't see the chat directly. But I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your training as a therapist to work with children. So the first question I have is, remember the word orientation when you're in graduate school, people are talking, well, what orientation are you, or what orientation do you affiliate with? So if you could put that in the chat, do you affiliate with being a certain therapist? CBT, behavioral, play, whatever, psychoanalyst, psychodynamic, put it in the chat if you affiliate or market yourself in terms of an orientation. I'm just so curious. Of course, no right or wrong answers, but what do you associate yourself with in terms of your therapeutic work?
So we have about a 20-second delay, but they are coming in now. So no, I don't affiliate with any. Many play therapy classes, none during formal education, trauma focused, school social worker, Arousal and touch points, MCPP, play, improv, play, CBT and MI, none. 20+ years working in hospice, school social worker. Play, or depending on what the client comes with. Relational, LMFT, person-centered and psychodynamic. Wow, quite a mix. CBT and family play therapy, working with individuals who are deaf. TFCBT, play, CPP. Oh, drama therapist. Trauma-informed art therapy, systems, play, CBT. RED therapy. I'm not familiar with that one.
Maybe reactive attachment disorder therapist. Maybe?
It's not RAD. No, it's RED.
Not RED. Oh, RED. Okay.
Anthony, let me know what that means. The RED, or if it was a typo. Play, trauma, IFS, school, counselor, LPC, CPT. So many acronyms in our field.
I know. I know. It's so great. Oh, these are great. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
So they're coming in. This is great. Like they're coming in kind of across the board of terms we are all familiar with. Thank you. Yeah. A few more.
Oh, sure. Family systems, DBT, person-centered. A lot of people are saying that just fitting the needs of my clients, which is wonderful.
Yes.
School-based therapist, ICU, school-based. That's a tricky job, and I love every minute of it.
Yes.
Integrative object relations, hybrid, MI.
Wow. I have one of those up here. Object relations. Yes. From
ecotherapy.
A long time ago. That's so cool. Ecological. Okay, this is like a little walk down memory lane. Plus
Adlerian.
Oh wow.
2 Adlerians. School-based, another school-based.
Yes. Claire Kopp, I think. Wow.
Oh, RET is recreational therapy.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh my goodness. Yay for rec therapists.
Existential.
Existential. Heck yeah, that's everything. Oh, this is so great. Thank you all, and welcome with your orientation or not, right? This is a great exercise. Another question I have is, if there was a course that you remember in graduate school that was super meaningful to you, or you remember as kind of making it more easy for you to choose, like, I really want to work with children. Do you remember the name of the course or what the course was about? I'd be really curious what crystallized memory you have of your training. Any kind of course, it doesn't have to be in child, but something that was meaningful that it has to do with development or child psychology.
Great. Oh, any course by Dan Siegel. Developmental psychology, school
Right.
social work, developmental psych, play therapy, parent infant mental health. Ooh, they're coming in fast. Parent infant mental health, behavior modification, 0 to 3 brain developments, child-centered play therapy, neurobiology and attachment, Erickson, whole brain child, my school-based internship, family systems, collaborative therapy, a lot of systems.
Okay.
Working in residential treatment guided me on what does not work in therapy.
Oh, amen to that.
Yeah.
Same here. Yes.
Developmental understanding trauma, play therapy, existential, even children look for meaning. I agree with you, David. Epigenetics, addiction diagnoses in teens, reading Donald Winnicott's Being Bullied as a Child inspired me to work with kids. Arts and expressive therapies. Yeah, I'm sorry that happened to you. Understanding trauma, working in a daycare, lots of child development.
Great. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Humanistic.
You are a fast reader.
These things are flying. I'm sorry if I didn't read.
No, that was great. This is kind of like stream of consciousness. It's just what I was hoping for, because I don't want to, I don't want to take up too much time. So this was perfect.
Excellent.
And it's really, yeah, it's so interesting, like what brings us here. And thank you to the person who said being bullied as a child, because you know, our choice in what kind of field to go to obviously can be impacted way early in childhood. So I remember I was hospitalized with a severe case of pneumonia when I was 12 or 13. And I was in there for 2 weeks, and they had a rolling library. So this lady that brought books over on the cart. And so I just chose a book called Dibs in Search of Self. It was about a little boy who couldn't talk, and his therapist who helped him talk. And I'll never forget, I was like, oh my gosh, this book is so cool. Can you do that as a job? And once I figured out that you could be a therapist that helps children in trouble, which says a lot about my own childhood, I'm like, sign me up. So thank you. For those of you who have felt this calling due to your own journey.
So many people are, I'm sorry, Mona, so many people are relating to you. I love that book. Great book, incredible book. Dibs in Search of, I mean, they're just,
oh my gosh, you guys remember that
blowing
book?
up. That book changed everything.
That's amazing, you guys, because that book was, I think, written in the 60s. So that's amazing.
Yeah, that's an old book. What a formative experience for you.
It was so formative. That book really changed my life and helped me. I think it helped me see that there was hope to feel better, because I definitely struggled as a child to feel less anxious. Yeah. Wow. Okay, thank you. So one more before I get started. One more question. And here's the question. Do any of you recall taking a course specifically in the topic of emotional co-regulation? Co-regulation.
No. Oh, this delay hasn't been long. It is overwhelmingly no. Nope. No, never.
Wow.
Somebody took a weekend class. Otherwise, these are 100% no's.
Okay. Like there's a mic drop situation. Boom.
Right. Like,
okay. Thank you. Okay. All right. That gives, because we're what we basically did right now is we did a little survey. We did a little poll, a straw poll. There's a lot of you out there. And okay, that's a great launching point. Great launching pad. So thank you so much, Kate. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll be back to interject with questions later.
Yeah, interject with questions at any point. I love being interrupted.
It looks like you have 407 people on right now.
Oh, so amazing. Thank you for joining me so much, colleagues, and at the end of the day too, and of the whole show. So I'm really grateful that you're here. And I know about all the amazing stuff you've learned so far. So before I get into the content of what I really want to talk about, and that is to make the argument that co-regulation should be a course in graduate school, I just wanted to review briefly. I know some of you may have heard this before, but I wanted to review the three paradigm shifts that our field is on the verge of making. And just so kind of we're all on the same page as to where I stand on where these paradigm shifts are in terms of what we're going to be learning today. So these little charts actually came from my colleague, Dr. Connie Lillis, whom I've worked closely with over many years to identify the problems with our systems and why they need updating based on relational neuroscience and what we've learned in the past 2 decades, specifically since the decade of the brain. So the first paradigm shift is in our interpretation of behaviors, and the status quo in traditional, especially educational systems, but really heavy in our field because of the legacy of behaviorism, cognitive behaviorism, is that behaviors are viewed through the lens of compliance. So we categorize behaviors as compliant or non-compliant, desired, undesired, etc. The new idea is that behaviors are going to be viewed through the lens of safety versus threat in the nervous system. And then the protective factors that are coming online as we make this shift is resilience. So the data on resilience, a lot of it is located on Harvard Center on the Developing Child website, is linking this understanding of the human safety system to resilience. The second paradigm shift is in our responses to behaviors. So again, in a traditional model, including many mental health therapists, and by the way, as I talk about these shifts, I will say what I say at every training, and that this is a no blame, no shame zone. I am not implying that one way is necessarily better than another way. It's your way. It's what you do. You have the best intentions. You want to help children. So if something I say throughout this next 90 minutes makes you feel like an ouch moment, like, oh, maybe that's wrong, or maybe I did this with my child, please wrap yourself in self-compassion and don't do that. Because everything I'm talking about, including the second paradigm shift, was where I was. That's what I was trained in. That's what I did for a decade in private practice. Aligning good or bad behavior is aligned with consequences. Tons of research on that, right? So the second paradigm shift is shifting our responses to behaviors where good and bad behaviors are unaligned with consequences because we understand them in a new way. And the new idea is that relational safety and relational joy is prioritized over rewards and punishment. And then the protective factor that comes from that is social connectedness. Finally, the third paradigm shift has to do with our expectations of behaviors. And currently, as I pointed out in that question that I got from a reporter in the last hour, is that our behavioral expectations are unrealistic. That somewhere in the world, I believe, I'm going to believe, well-intentioned parents, for whatever reason, believed that bringing their child to a jail and pretending like it's going to enforce the idea that a child needs to learn how to use the toilet is somehow accepted in our culture. And even though that is a very stark example, in the education system, I have lesser examples. I'm sure you do too, if you're working in the education system as an interface on IEP teams, where you will also see sticks and carrots used to change behaviors. So that's the status quo. That's where we're at. At the highest level of our education system, that's where it's at. And the new idea is that we're shifting from a behavioral lens to a neurodevelopmental lens that guides decisions and understanding. And the knowledge of parenting and child development is that protective factor. So there's so many things in these 3 paradigm shifts. I just wanted to lay them out there as a reminder. And then this last review slide is having to do with the behavioral iceberg. Kate mentioned the book Beyond Behaviors, the idea that behaviors are the tip of the iceberg, that they are useful signals and provide such useful information about what children need on an emotional level, on a physiological level, and that they should be viewed as a signal rather than the target of our interventions. It's kind of like bringing a car with a problem with the engine to a car wash and thinking that that car wash is going to fix the engine. So the behavioral iceberg shows us that the adaptations that humans make has to do with things like the physiological state, the nervous system, the sensory processing of, which is how all humans are in the world, how we are experiencing each other and the environment is through our sensory systems. So that is the first part, which is a review. And now I just want to start by saying that the fields serving children, including child psychology, were developed many, many years before an integrated understanding of human development. And that's one of the reasons that we had hundreds of different orientations come up, which is actually kind of cool, because I think if we crowdsource all of our orientations together, what an incredible book that would be. And it's also why some of your favorite courses are all over the map too, is that on our training, when the field of psychology and education and medical pediatrics and occupational therapy and speech therapy and physical therapy were created, that was like, between 50 and 150 years ago, depending on the discipline. It was when the brain was studied in its component parts. Speech therapists learned about Broca's aphasia and the different areas of the brain associated with speech. Physical therapists learned about functions of the muscles and how those work in combination with the bones and stretching and all that. And medical clinicians studied the body, and mentalization was in psychology. So our fields are kind of all over the place. They weren't an integrated whole. But I'm beginning to think that this integrated whole is where our field needs to focus on more. And over the last year or so, I've been working with some amazing people at PESI and Psychotherapy Networker to create a course that is going to attempt to integrate. And in that work, I have, and through the research that I did on resilience over the past few years, I've come to believe that at the core of what we do as therapists is to help children with the various range of emotional self-regulation, which is like a hallmark of mental health and flexibility. And I'm going to talk about, what that means. So emotions. Many of us consider ourselves like emotional blacksmiths or people who can work with emotions and help children to understand and utilize and self-regulate by talking to them. And isn't that an incredible opportunity? I mean, it's so great to talk to children about emotions, and there are many little books written on it too. Parents can talk to children with emotions, about emotions. But emotions are also really kind of the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. Labeling emotions is something that happens at a point that requires all these steps that come before it that most of us were not trained in. So just as a little example, some kids, it's really great for a kid to be able to say something like, I feel bad. I mean, that's huge. Just to be able to say, I feel bad is representing, that's not, bad isn't an emotion, but it is a feeling state. So if a child is saying, I feel bad, and then you ask them, oh, you feel bad. Like, can you tell me more? What's that bad about? And they say something like, well, I feel really sad. Wow. Okay, we have gone from bad to sad. That's huge. I asked a 4-year-old about this the other day, and I kept on going because she said, I feel bad. And then I paused. I said, can you say a little more? I feel sad. Then I held space for sad. I'm like, wow, sad. I wonder what the sad is about. And she said, I miss my dad. He's been gone for a couple days. I feel sad because I miss. So 4-year-olds can go through this arc. That's pretty amazing. Most of them cannot. But the ability to say, to feel, I feel bad, and then say, I am scared about, or I am sad about, is a huge developmental milestone. And I wonder if you guys, like I did for many, many years, focused on this for kids. I mean, I even had like puzzle pieces with faces on them, all the different types of facial expressions, and get them out, trying to help them sort out how they were feeling and put names to faces and stickers and charts and everything, because I think that's very comfortable in our field, like talking about emotions. We're paid to do that, essentially. Parents love it when we help a child talk about their emotions. And the information that is coming in about how this all develops, and even why some individuals, adults, neurodivergent individuals, may not be able to do the feeling to word, emotion word process. Not all people can do that. And I'm going to be talking about why. But just to give you a little grounding in the theory that I'm using right now, the theory of constructed emotions by Lisa Feldman Barrett. Wow, like let's take research out of the ivory tower and put it into our therapy offices. This is the problem, is that many neuro researchers are not also clinical psychologists, clinical therapists, child therapists. And Lisa Barrett started as a clinical, and then she turned her head towards research. And now she's one of the top neuroscientists in the world that cited in research. So here's the emotion processing, and I'm going to get to why it's connected to co-regulation, but the general sense of how someone feels is known as a feeling state. We can call it affect. So feeling is affect, and then the feeling of pleasant or unpleasant is known as the valence. So essentially you're feeling pleasant or unpleasant, good or bad. That's valence. And then the degree of how much you feel that is known as arousal. So valence is I feel good or bad. And then arousal is I feel really, really good or really, really bad or somewhere in between. So the degree of pleasant or unpleasant, and then calmness or agitation. And how a person feels, how a child feels, how an adult feels is always some combination of those two things, of the valence and of the arousal. So helping our children figure out how they feel on a physical basis, I'm talking about any feeling in the body, is ground zero for thinking about emotion words. What this means on a practical basis is that we shouldn't be talking about emotion words so soon. We should be talking about physical sensations, because that's the birthplace of emotional literacy. So let me frame this for you from a developmental perspective, and then we'll go into the tools, how to do it, what this is. So many of you know that I really appreciate the social emotional processes, the milestones, the levels. They were known as all of those things that were described by Dr. Stanley Greenspan and Dr. Serena Wieder. Dr. Greenspan was a psychiatrist and Dr. Wieder a clinical psychologist. They met, they were working at high levels, I think at the National Institutes of Mental Health. They were in near Washington, DC, and they did a complex study of high-risk infants in the 1970s that turned into a series of articles and studies about 6 main processes of social and emotional development that really, I think, improved on what the ones that I was taught in graduate school, like Piaget, and it complements Kohlberg stages and all those different things we learned about in terms of stages. But these social emotional milestones, Greenspan and Wieder, 1998, are incredibly helpful for clinicians. So I'll just go through them and then I'll tell you why I did. So the first, I talk about like through the stages of building a house, just easier than all this jargon. So building a house, the first thing that usually gets built is the foundation. So the foundation, the first level of social and emotional development, is something called regulation and attention. And that is the human's ability to stay regulated enough in the body so that they can attend to the environment. Certain infants, certain children, certain babies have problems with this. Very premature babies have a very hard time sucking, swallowing, and breathing at the same time. And forget about gazing into someone's eyes if you are struggling with keeping your body budget going. So this foundation of regulation and attention, depending on the genetics the intrauterine environment, the birth, and the child finally coming into the world impact regulation and attention. But this is the foundation, because before you can relate to another person, before you can connect with them with your eyes, which is the first way humans connect, or through touch, you have to be in your body enough, calm enough in your body, in order to pay attention to that. So the foundation of the house is regulation and attention. The next thing that I'm not a home builder. these are my guesses. That after you have a foundation, you kind of frame it. You start to do the framing on the outside of a house. That framing in humans is engagement and relating. And once you are stable enough in your body, the human spirit, the human being, the human organism, as they say in research, begins to engage. Little babies can gaze into their parents' eyes when they're feeding, or just gaze into their eyes when they're within those 10 or so inches. So engagement and relating is a product of regulation and attention. Keep in mind that even though these two processes are usually attained in the first 5 months, it's not chronological, it's developmental. So you may be working with a 12-year-old who has difficulty regulating their attention, or an 8-year-old who has difficulty regulating their attention. You may be working with a 5-year-old who has their regulation and attention pretty well on board, but they don't know how to engage and relate. So that's where their constriction is. So that's the second process, is framing. It allows us to engage and relate, which is, as we know, a bedrock of human attachment. And then the third process, as I think about it, is that you kind of have to do the wiring. You have to wire up the house before the walls are closed. So the wiring is something called purposeful emotional interactions. And what's that? Purposeful interactions is where you communicate without words. Again, typically it's something that a child would do. A baby can coo back and forth. A toddler can play funny word games back and forth. An older child, you can do funny faces back and forth. So it's the nonverbal communication is that electrical wiring that allows you to one day read social meaning off of other people. It's really important. You may be working with some kids who have difficulty because they can't read the facial expressions and the social nuance of what is going on with the peer. So that's the wiring. The wiring allows for you to have different rooms of the house, meaning you can explore beyond your own room, and that's called social problem solving. So many of us are treating children who have difficulty social problem solving. A simple problem, sharing toys, being able to allow someone else to go on the swing or down the slide instead of you. Figuring out more complex social pieces in middle school. That social problem solving is dependent on all these other steps that I just described. The fifth part is, once we have those rooms ready, then it's time to decorate the house. Decorating the house is all about using symbols. This is when children can begin to use words to stand in for things, instead of saying instead of dragging your parent to the kitchen to get an apple, you can say, "Apple, please." So symbolic development is when you can tell stories, when you can use words, when you can play, when you can ask those W questions: when, why, how. How is not a W, but where. And you can you can use your ideas, you can describe your ideas either through technology, if you're neurodivergent, or through speaking, if you're a speaker. That is just like, again, a huge part of development is being able to talk about your world, to use your language to have that social problem solving. And that leads to the last process, which is building bridges between your ideas and the ideas of somebody else. You can understand that other people have different opinions than you, and you can learn to work with that. So 6 very important steps, and I'm going to tell you now why they're important. And that is that all the later steps, being able to understand if what I'm asking somebody to do, like a peer or my parent or a friend, is something that is going to work or not, is dependent on the other milestones. The foundation, which is the child able to be calm and pay attention. The framing is the child open to engaging, is their engagement with others. And then the wiring is the child able to use back and forth communication, leads to the 4th, which is social problem solving, using your verbal skills, and then creating the 6th one is creating the bridge between you and other people. And that is a short version of social and emotional development, which really, really holds up well for our different therapies. And it also helps you figure out where you need to work with a child. So I actually use this model, and the easiest way that I use it is in a printed form, in a flip chart, but to see where that child is in their development, so you know where to target your therapy, rather than just going for talking about emotion words. We remember that emotion, the ability to use emotion words, is sitting on this house. And the bottom of the house, the foundation down here, oops, I should do it like this, down here, has to do with, is the child calm and able to pay attention? And are they engaging with others? So self-regulation is what allows us to respond to life's twists and turns with flexibility and forethought rather than exploding or acting impulsively. It is described as the intentional regulation of one's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. How many of us are sought to help children with their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors? Like basically kind of all of us. And research has shown that co-regulation, this ability to come alongside somebody who's struggling and help them find regulation, help them find that calm attention, the first foundation of the house, is the superfood that nourishes children's ability to self-regulate, which helps build teenagers and adults who can calm themselves down rather than lashing out at those they love, who can talk to themselves and say, this is going to be okay, rather than crumpling up a piece of paper and throwing it away and walking out of a room, who can tell somebody that they are in distress rather than punching somebody out. So this ability for self-regulation is so foundational. And I really believe that challenged or incomplete self-regulation, read that as physiological state regulation, the ability to calm our own nervous systems, underlies many, if not most, if not all, of the DSM childhood categories of mental illness. So I think that self-regulation is at the core of children's challenges. And it's been poorly defined. Well, we've defined self-regulation, but what builds it is co-regulation, which is what this talk is about and what I want to talk about now. But before I go into that, maybe I'll check to see if we have any, was there anything, Kate, any comments or questions or anything you might want to ask me at this point before I go into co-regulation? I've kind of built the story. Sorry, it took a long time because I know you want the tools and techniques, but they're coming.
Yes, no, you read my mind. I thought, before we jump into this, maybe I'll ask these too. So a lot of people are resonating with the metaphor of the house.
Okay, good.
But there were two specific questions. I'm just gonna move them over here.
Yeah.
Let's see. So Patricia was asking if you could please expound on how to help a child shift from excessive preoccupation with body cues to a more realistic view of body cues. I can put it in the chat for you as well.
Great. Preoccupation with body cues. I'm just curious what that means. Like, what does that look like? Preoccupation with what are body cues?
I'm not sure. Patricia, if you want to put another question in, I can ask further.
Okay.
There's gonna be a little bit of a delay here, but in the meantime, I'll ask you another one.
It's a great question.
It is. Marion is asking, I repeatedly find that children confuse the emotions associated with arousal, even when the valence is completely different. Do others find that arousal is more salient than valence, particularly for children on the spectrum and children with ADHD?
Oh, that is great.
I'll put it in the Zoom chat.
I love that. I love that. I think a short answer, because what you're talking about really is the differences in brain wiring and circuitry wiring and interoception, the huge concept in neuroscience that is linked in the research to self-regulation. And the answer to that, I believe, is yes, that children and even adults are more able to observe arousal, maybe than valence. So arousal is it firing or not? And then valence, I think, is more nuanced. It's a little more granular. So a very good question. And I think this is where we're going to be working inside of those individual differences for each person. Yeah.
Patricia did get back to us. I see. So like somatic complaints. So always focusing on stomach aches, things like that. So the question is how to help them shift from excessive preoccupation to a more realistic view of those body cues.
Okay.
Thank you, Patricia, for clarifying.
Thank you so much, Patricia. And the short answer is what we're going to be talking about now, and that is through co-regulation. But I would also and thank you so much for the question. And I'd like to say that maybe I'm reading into this, but to me, excessive preoccupation with somatic cues, it can't be excessive, because if it's there, it's there. And if it's excessive, it's lots of cues for the people around the child to pay attention to. Wow. Where are you feeling that? Tell me more. So in a traditional view, we might say the child is excessively preoccupied with their body, but in a brain-body principle view, we would say, let's use that interoceptive awareness, that body-based awareness, which may be tuned up in this child, and let's figure out a way to help them make friends with their body. I have so many clients that I've seen who have had somatic gut complaints, tummy complaints. The GIs, pediatric GI, saying, we don't find anything. They put the poor kid through all these tests and they're like, no, structurally they're fine. Okay, please we know stress lands in the gut, right? So just like pass it off to mental health, this is the problem we have. It's not integrated. Sorry, Kate, did you have something to say?
No, that's exactly
Okay.
right. I just wanted to hop back on because somebody asked a quick question about the house
Yeah.
metaphor. How do you help kids build this house? Kids who experience traumas and abuse, and those the trauma and abuse are ongoing.
Oh, yes. Okay. I'm going to keep that in my head as we continue, because we're going to now talk about co-regulation.
Wonderful. I put it in the Zoom chat for you as well, so you can refer.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Trauma work, helping children who've been exposed to toxic stress, helping children who are in toxic environments, is all treated in my model and in my view through co-regulation, not through reinforcement schedules, not through necessarily reading them books yet, but through the embodied experience of feeling like somebody is sharing their calm state, their ability to tolerate a situation with you. So it's a very jeopardized experience to be working with a child when you don't have access to the family. But let me put that on hold because it's a great question. And what I'm going to be talking about now is that the remarkable feat that we are going to be doing is that the children we see with diagnoses, I believe, again, that have difficulties with self-regulation, which is why they come to see us, they have symptoms, is that we help them regulate their body budget. Their feedback system from their body to their brain is not comfortable. It's sending them into distress or shutdown. That happens in trauma a lot. So we help regulate their body budget through interactions. So I talk about this as a parenting model, like how do parents co-regulate? And it's very interesting because in the common social media world, and many of you are familiar with parenting by Instagram. We are in a world where many of the parents that we see are getting their feedback for free from someone on Instagram. Yes, I am on Instagram. There's no way around it. But what I'm noticing from the parents I see and from the people in my community, the parents in the community that I'm in contact with on a constant basis, is that, and articles that are coming out about co-regulation is about coddling, permissive parenting. So it's getting thrown in a bucket of, oh yeah, that's just the old stuff, the free range parenting, the permissive parenting. So we are talking about responsive parenting that's responsive to the nervous system, not gentle parenting. Gentle parenting is kind of associated now with permissive parenting. And I think that since we're therapists, we can understand the concept of cognitive dissonance. When something is uncomfortable, what do? We demean it. We make it into something it's not, because we feel uncomfortable. We feel uncomfortable that maybe we're too harsh or maybe XYZ. So that's the myth of co-regulation. What co-regulation is for therapists, I believe that our main job as therapists is to help caregivers and parents, whoever that is, whoever's in most contact with the child, learn how to co-regulate with that child, which includes understanding the child's body up and top down individual differences, and to learn where the children's challenge zone is. A challenge zone is where you're pushed just a little bit outside of your comfort level. Many parents of the children we see have a hard time when their child is outside of the child's comfort level. They're doing well when they're not challenged or where they're where they're in control of what they can do. But once they're at school, or once they're asked to do something that's beyond their comfort level, it all breaks down. So we are all about kind of stretching the comfort level, because in order to grow, you have to feel a little bit of stress. Bruce Perry says that. He's a child psychiatrist. And he says that in order for your brain to learn something new, it has to feel a little bit of stress, because that is the marker that you're about to learn something new. So helping enlarge challenge zones is, I think, also a lot of what we do. So one question I have for you is, do you assess for co-regulation across the ages of the children you see? And how do we do this? So let me ask, before I do that, let me ask in the chat again, how do we do this? Just say yes or no. If it's yes, say yes. If it's no, say no. Sorry, I'm being very concrete. But do you see families, do you see children in dyads with their parent or family? Mostly, say yes. Or do you see children on their own? So say no. So if you see family and dyads, say yes in the chat. If you see children on their own, say no. And we'll see what people pop up.
Hi, Mona. Yeah, it looks like a lot of no's, some both.
Okay.
I do both for most families. Yes, yes, both. No, no, no. Lots of no's.
Okay, great, great.
So
okay.
Across the board.
Across the board. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, fabulous. That fits with my experiences in agencies with when I do guest supervision or go in on case discussion. So that fits. That also is kind of across the board. So thank you so much. And again, remember, this is no blame, no shame. This is just how we are trained, what our preference is, what we feel comfortable with. But here's the deal. One of the reasons that I'm going to be recommending that many of us investigate, become curious about seeing dyads instead of children by themselves, unless the situation is extenuating, is that children are with their caregivers 24/7. And the power of influencing co-regulation in a relationship is much greater than the hour or two we spend a week giving a child tools and techniques to deal with the suffering in their life. So I would consider learning a parent coaching model as your first line approach, just to think about it, to try it out. I can give you, I think at the last slide, I have recommendations for programs, little training programs for professional CEs. And we may have some with PESI on DIR, floor time, and other parent coaching models. Jonathan Green's model, child parent psychotherapy is one, but it's really different than individual child psychotherapy. I would have to say that initially it feels much harder, because you don't just have one client in the room, you have two or three. And there's a lot of moving parts. But I would like to put it out there that co-regulation begins with the parent-child interaction. It is at the foundation of difficulties in self-regulation. It is the most organic way that we can help a child who's struggling, is to get to that caregiver with the child. So one thing we want to do is to assess the parent's ability to co-regulate with the child. How do you do this? Well, one way, the first thing I do is I always meet with a parent alone, on the first session. If that has to be a phone call, a Zoom call, but I never meet with the parent and child unless the child's like 5 months old. I never meet with everybody at the first session because I want to hear the parent's perspective. I want to hear about what it's like to be a parent. I want to read between the lines, and I want to assess for the parent's ability to co-regulate. This is not blaming the parent. This is having so much compassion for the parent on what is it like for you to parent this child, this tricky child, right? I wouldn't use the word tricky, but you know what I mean? It's like we're joining the parent. We are co-regulating with the parent. We're making them feel so valued by us as the expert on their child, rather than in our long history in our field of parent blame, you know, blaming them for their child's problems. We have a long history of parent blame in the field of child psychology, and we have to, I think, talk about that more. It came from other theories and, you know, some stuff up there too. a lot of old guys who had interesting ideas about motherhood and all that, but some of those ideas are also that mothers are the cause of problems. Only in the 1950s, that's not that long ago, that's when I was born, was refrigerator mothers causing autism. So let's just say they've got a lot of stuff floating through our collective subconscious as therapists. So assess the parent's ability to co-regulate. What are they thinking about the child? What are their thoughts about the child's behaviors? Where are they coming from? Do they have fantasies, ideas about why the child is doing this? Do they know the difference between top-down and body-up behaviors? Can you observe? I don't know if any of you do home visits, but you know, as a person who assesses infants and toddlers, I often do home visits, or I actually did before COVID a lot, and I'm going back a little bit more, but can you do home visits? Can you just observe? Can you be a fly in the wall? Can you observe at school? Be a fly on the wall, and preferably observe before the child meets you. Because once the child meets you, then they might want to come and play with you because you're fun. So casual observation. You can ask the parent for videos of the most difficult times if they're willing to show you those videos. So I want to bring up that what I'm talking about now is that many of us use a scaled version of adult therapy to help children talk about their thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And I'm suggesting that there's nothing wrong with that, except for many of us are building that top level skill. Remember, that's the decoration of the house. Talking about feelings and emotions is level 5 of the house, when most of the kids are struggling in levels 1 and 2. Regulation and attention and relationships. So we want to go to the lowest, the most foundational levels first, and that is using a child's community of co-regulation and figuring out if we are in something called the expectation gap. The expectation gap is expecting a child to do something before they have the neurodevelopmental structure to do it, before they're developmentally able to do it. So self-regulation develops from co-regulation, and the key is to building this house of self-regulation is something called responsive care. So responsive interactions is linked, responsivity is linked in the research to brain architecture that leads to better emotional regulation. So this is from the research. In the research, responsive interactions, parents do 3 things. This is for infants. Number 1, they observe the baby's cues. All they have to do is observe the baby's cues. You need to observe something before you can do something about it. Number 2, they, to the best of their ability, they accurately interpret the cues. So let's just say the first observation is that baby is yawning and rubbing their eyes. So a responsive parent would observe the cue, oh, they're rubbing their eyes. And then they would guess, it's been a few hours, maybe they need a nap. And then the third piece is they take an action to meet the baby's need, the physical need. They put the baby down for a nap. So that is responsive care. Can the parent do these three things? And by the way, they are not expected to do these three things perfectly. They are expected, parents, we are expected to do this imperfectly, because it's impossible to read a baby's mind all the time and figure it out. And the most important thing is not getting it right, it's the repair. So the baby's not tired. Oh, wow, okay. Wow, they're not falling asleep. They're starting to cry more. Then maybe they're hungry. Feed the baby. Oh, they were hungry. Yay. And then the action changes. So responsive care in an older child would look like observing the child's cues. Let's just say a kid gets into the car from school. They look really hangry, you know that look, and you check in their lunchbox. The parent says they did not eat any lunch. You know they're hangry. They are starting to yell and scream. You accurately interpret the cues. This child needs food, and they need water, and they need to go home. So maybe they go home, or they drive through somewhere, get them something to eat, and then they come home and settle together. So response, we want to see if the parent is responsive. Are they figuring things out? Or are they having these narratives in their head about what's causing the child's distress? So here's a little video of responsive care. The parent is observing. She is trying different things. She's looking at, what does this baby need? Oh, maybe he needs comfort. And the baby is folding his head into her neck. So that would be an example of responsivity. Here's another one. The child was having a hard time. And there's no words to these. These are silent. So the child is having a hard time, and the caregiver is positioning her body in a way where she can look into her eyes, and you can see the hope in the child's eyes. You can see their bodies kind of connecting with each other. And facilitating this kind of co-regulation is magic, both in the brain development of self-regulation, but also in the pleasure and enjoyment that parents and children have. So we want to be the architects of this. We don't really want to do this with a child. We want the parent to do this with a child. This is intimate. We can talk to children, but embracing co-regulation, embracing this ability, regardless of age, to do something like this. I see you, and I'm going to figure out how to help you, is how mental and emotional health is built. It's not built through reinforcement schedules. It's built through relationships. So the house is built through this responsive care, and the repair process is the main thing. It's not parents getting it right. It's in the repair. And then it helps children one day to talk about their emotions and feelings. So I think of us as kind of the conductor of an orchestra, and the orchestra is the parent-child relationship. I think of us as the gardener of a garden, and the flowers are the parent-child relationship. And it's in this model, the client is not the child, it's the relationship. And the child and their primary caregivers is the client. So I'll say right now, because some of you are working with foster kids, it's whoever the child has the most likelihood of being with. And that could be a teacher, it could be a grandparent, it could be a foster parent who's planning to adopt. In certain situations, under dire conditions, of course, that's you, maybe, if you're a social worker. If you are a therapist who may be in the child's life for a long time, we redefine who the client is as the child and their most likely relationship. That becomes the client and not just the child. And of course, for billing purposes, whatever works. I mean, this is me talking, not giving you official advice, but of course you can bill for the child because we know how relationships are built. So it doesn't, you don't have to necessarily bill for family therapy unless that works too. It's what the child needs. So the parallel process then is between us, as the therapist, the parent, and the child. And here's what it looks like. Co-regulation begins with a therapist who feels regulated and calm, and we co-regulate with the parents. We believe the parents. We try to help them feel valued by us, and we try to see the difficulty from their point of view. And then we support the parent to co-regulate with the child. This is called a parallel process. 1, 2, 3. And the corrective emotional experience in our traditional way of looking at things is that the therapist is the agent of change. They impart wisdom, help the child develop insight, and kind of fix the child. Or help fix the child or the adult or the teenager. In this paradigm, the corrective emotional experience is helping a child and their community co-regulate, because emotional safety helps unleash social and emotional development. So moving on here, here is the power of children showing us what they need in terms of co-regulation. And here again is to toddlerhood, but look at this little one who's actively showing the parent who's not really co-regulating what they need. It's called smash face. Okay, I need you, you get it? And then the parent has the choice of what they can do, or maybe they don't have the choice, but someone else is and you can just acknowledge, oh, sweetheart, I'm working, but oh, yes, you are there. I see you. So the 3 steps of co-regulation in childhood: observe the child's cues, interpret the cues, and take action to meet those child's needs. Now, I love Dr. Alcy, one of our colleagues. He talks about therapy as improvisation. It's all improvisation. We have to be comfortable with that. And the challenge zone is different for each child. And we want to figure out how to help the caregiver really understand their child. And so for parents, here are the messages that I recommend that we give. We want to have responsive interactions with the parents so that they can have them with their children. That's the parallel process. So we can say things like, I see you. I believe you. You aren't a bad parent. And I'm thinking, you don't use these exact words, but what fits to the situation? You're trying as hard as you can. You tried as hard as you could. We will work through this together. I'll help you understand your child. And most of all, giving parents the message that there's always hope to rewire their brain and the child's brain towards regulation. The brain is a prediction machine. We can always rewire the brain. It takes time, but to expect something different. So here are some techniques to co-regulate with parents. This is why I think it's really important to get to know the parent on their own. Let the parent tell their story. Listen deeply and compassionately. Listen for signs of self-doubt, self-blame, guilt that they caused the child's problem. go into on trying to understand how this parent sees this child's problem. And then don't go into problem solving right away. I know parents want quick, easy answers. I know tools and techniques. It's like, have you tried XYZ, ABC? But if we can avoid the urge to do that, we can get into the heart of co-regulation, which is really seeing the parent and understanding how to help them feel more grounded, how to help them not lose it with their child, and help them learn how to co-regulate. So as appropriate, provide the message to the parent that this is a hard journey and that we see the problem as not them being bad parents, that things that they can shift, but believing that they are using their resources, and we're going to help resource them even more to help understand how to help their child regulate. So as a therapist, I think how you are is more important sometimes than what you say. If you're curious, if you're non-judgmental, sometimes I hear from parents like 10, even 25 years later. It's crazy. I feel so blessed to be in this field this long, but sometimes I'll hear from parents checking in with me. I still have the same email address, and they'll just say, and sometimes I'll say, what do you remember about our work together? And sometimes, most of the time, I should say, they will say things like, you believed in my child. You believed in me. Because our system is so rigged against parents. And if they have experienced a little bit of the IEP process or the insurance process, or even getting their child evaluated through well-intentioned colleagues, it's just grueling. And there isn't a lot of joy. There isn't a lot of humor or levity. And I think we can, we can help parents co-regulate and listen without judgment or interruption. And when we do that, then the parent can do that with a child. Instead of peppering a child with questions, a parent can say, well, what sounds good to you right now? How can I help you right now? What might feel good to you right now? And then let parents know that the inquiry can be about wanting to understand better, and they can empathize with children's problems rather than trying to first solve them for them. And they can use language appropriate to the child's developmental level and allow a child to be expert on the things they are passionate about and reinforce those passions and strengths. Examples of non-co-regulation would be promoting parents saying, just calm down, telling children their behavior is inappropriate without an understanding that the child's actual behavior is a stress response, secluding or restraining children, ignoring children, telling them to stop moving. Children who are moving, who are upset, need the movement to calm down in their bodies. That's a form of regulation. And there's one more slide here that I wanted to go to is allowing the parent to see that their child's behaviors are protective to their nervous system, and that their behaviors with their child are protective to the nervous system. So that what we are engaging in then is this work through of that house of social and emotional development, so that we're guiding the parents through the different steps, depending on where we see the challenge in the child, starting with the child's ability to be regulated in their body. And I've said before that some of the most valuable information I've gathered from the occupational therapists who are expert in sensory processing in my community to help me understand better when children are having difficulties that are persistent, that might start in preschool or kindergarten, that oftentimes these sensory differences, what we used to call temperament, temperament is really being reworked too, but to understand how this child's biology, this child's way of where their nature meets nurture, we're figuring out how to help the parent nurture the child's nature. And the way we do that is to teach parents and to not only teach parents how to co-regulate, but nurture it like a gardener, like an orchestra conductor. And it's very, very satisfying when we do that. So, yeah, I think we'll maybe have a discussion now. I just want to thank you for your attention. Please stay in touch. I have a lot of resources on my website, and I really look forward to learning together with you as I continue to develop a model that is going to be called Brain Body Principles in Child Psychotherapy. So thank you.
Thank you, Mona, as always. That went by so fast. I was like, holy smokes, it's already.
I know. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
I need to move these over again. So much chatter on the chat side of things where people are sharing stories, and I won't go into a ton of detail, but just about the struggles they're facing with parents or solutions. Like there's just so much collaboration going on in the chat on this topic that I think you've inspired and gotten some wheels turning.
Oh, I'm so glad. Let me imagine what some of those are, because I wonder, because for me, when I'm doing supervision and stuff, we're thinking about, well, these parents are so hard to work with. I'm wondering if something in the chat is like, well, that sounds good, but these parents, and there are difficulties with the parent. So I just want to say, I honor that. I hear what you're saying. But if we can reframe that to, okay, this is interesting. Let's think about our most difficult parents in our caseloads as also the most vulnerable. So those are the parents that we need to embrace, and I don't mean embrace like physically, but I mean understand that our ability to help them fight back on the blame and shame and sometimes self-hatred they have, and maybe trauma history in some of our parents, whereby these recreated scenarios happen where they are triggered by their child's behaviors into these predictive subconscious brain memories where they are punishing their child because of that unhealed part of their inner self. So I think if we can just hold space for that, I know that challenging parents are difficult for us as clinicians, and we can maybe think of them as also the most needing of compassion because they are the most vulnerable in their nervous systems.
Again, the paradigm shift. I mean, that's a totally different way to look at it. I can attest that early in my career working with kids, I very much disliked working with parents. And a lot of it was that I felt protective of the child and I thought they deserved better, and it came from a good place. But
yes,
over time, you start to learn they're crucial to the entire operation, right? I mean, that they are, and like you said, the most vulnerable. And even the tiniest shift in a parent changes everything downstream. It's just amazing.
It does. It changes everything downstream. I had a parent, I wish I could show it to you right now. I had a video of a parent describing the shift. She hadn't, her youngest was 3, and she was regularly yelling at her child multiple times a day for like a year. And she made a video on day 10, I think, where she hadn't had the urge to yell because of a shift in herself, of self-acceptance in herself. And it's really touching because that one tiny shift in saying, I believe in you as a parent, did something to her relationship with her nervous system, which is allowing her to not use her children as that trauma healer. It's
Wow,
really
beautiful.
deep. It's really
Yeah.
deep. What we do is so significant, and you really do have two different clients. You have the
Yes.
patient, you have the child client, and then you have the parent. But I'm beginning to believe that the parent's nervous system is what we should attend to first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a shift for me because I went into child psychology because I didn't want to deal with adults.
Correct.
Hey, I love this field. Just let me play.
Yes. Well, and for a while I couldn't work with adults only because I was worried about their children. So, there's a whole thing.
It's the whole thing.
But there's a lot in here about showing compassion to parents. My goal is to teach the child that they can be seen. I tell parents what I feel is the truth. Parenting is the hardest job. The vast majority are good parents who need the same thing we all need. Ever notice how the best parents are the ones with the most guilt? Just so much, and just so much gratitude. As now I'm getting a little more up to date here. There's so much gratitude for you and your work. Loving this session, so phenomenal, which is goes without saying, but lots of appreciation for you in this chat. Let me jump to a question. We do have some time, thankfully. Okay, so you did already touch on this quite a bit, but it looks like quite a few people have voted in the meantime to elaborate on bottom up and top down as far as co-regulation goes, just kind of an overview of how that works.
Great. Yeah. If you want a deep explanation of it, I think I covered it in last summer or the summer before, and I didn't want to repeat it, but I feel like it's so important. I probably should every time. And that is that most of us are not familiar with this concept of body up and top down behaviors. Simply put, it's the distinction between a stress response, which is the activation of the sympathetic nervous system, which is automatic, and instinctual. So a tantrum in a 3-year-old is a perfect example. Comes on fast. It is triggered by who knows what, but it doesn't matter because it's the neuroception in the child, and it's characterized by movement. So top-down behavior, body-up behaviors are ones where it happens pretty fast, or you're noticing these characteristics of either fast movement. It can be like facial expressions, mouthing off, having a look of disrespect. A lot of those things are actually body-up behaviors and not intentional misbehaviors. And then that's side by side by top-down behaviors, which are more mediated by our thinking brain and the prefrontal cortex, which would be an example of that would be waiting till your mom goes to bed and then figuring out where the iPad is and sneaking it out and watching a movie, and you're doing a really creative workaround with your intentionality. That would be a top-down behavior. But most of the time we just think of misbehavior as misbehavior, and not, is this a stress response in the body whereby the child doesn't have self-regulation yet. And I think one of the most important things from this talk is to remember that self-control is a derivative of self-regulation.
Right.
And some people, even though they may be 18 years old, don't have good self-regulation. Many of our clients don't. And here's another thing. Think about, you can be advocates. Think about the inpatient settings where people with explosive behaviors or these inward behaviors like not eating, like eating disorders, have these instinctual protective based behaviors, and they're on level drop systems. So if they have an explosive behavior, they get their level drop so that inpatient, they get fewer privileges, which usually involves more social isolation, which is the opposite of what they need, which is co-regulation with an adult that says, I know, I believe in you, and I'm here with you. And that this is a hard time right now, instead of, okay, go put your level down. This is where our field is at. We're not making the distinction, and we're punishing or using these theories that were initially made for non-humans.
Yes, you're exactly right. We probably have time for one more. Okay. How would you suggest we work with dyads if we're in the school system? So as we've read, there's a lot of school-based folks who are here, which I know is your second language. Speaking with them, what are your recommendations for this kind of work and working in dyads for school?
Yeah, for a few things. If you're a school counselor, then the dyad is the teacher child. Because if you're a school counselor, then very creatively, and believe me, this is a hard, as you know, Kate, this is a hard job, because you've got, or if you're a school social worker as well. There was a school social worker on the call this morning, and she is being called in all the time when there are big explosions in the classroom. It's a very difficult situation. But if you're able to have a talk with the teacher and help the teacher understand the power of one, the power of her or an aide. Maybe this child needs an aide. Let's advocate for more compassionate aides in the classroom, because again, the education system was built on the industrial complex of mass education. That doesn't work well for vulnerable nervous systems, especially under trauma. But view the teacher child, maybe. If you have contact with the parents, the same principle involves. You see the parent, you try to get to know how you can help them understand their child a little better. This explaining the difference between a stress behavior and a purposeful misbehavior is very useful for some parents. And I have different, I know I'm not supposed to talk about products here, so I don't want to.
Oh, no, you're okay.
I'm okay. All right.
So as long as you're not going into some big sales pitch.
Okay, good. No, this is not a sales pitch, but this is what
No.
I use the flip chart for, because I can
Yes.
show the teacher,
Yes.
here's how we reconceptualize it for the teacher, for the parent, and then we're all on the same page. We're literally reading off the same page, because this is a new language for us. Even for me, it's a new language, a new way of explaining human behaviors. So you can work with the teacher, you can work with the parent, even if it's little snippets, but do what you can. And then, for sure, the power of one, the power of you. If you see that child once a week or in a pull-out for 15 minutes, or just know how powerful that is. So many children remember the kind people in their lives, even if they were in their lives for a few moments. So the power of each and every one of you. If you're doing individual therapy, it is fine. You may likely impact the trajectory of a child's life forever. So power of one.
Wonderful reminder for everyone who's out there doing this work. It's so incredibly important. And you're absolutely right. When you think about your own childhood, and I mean that in the royal you can remember the people who were kind, the people who saw you, the people who gave you patience and grace and compassion, right? And helped you through your struggles, rather. And you remember the people who shamed you too. But but you
Absolutely.
But
absolutely.
you hold heart for the people who gave you, who saw you.
Yes. Yes. And in
Mhm.
most of our therapeutic models, we think about the idea of the internalized you, the internalized me. And the internalized me comes from those messages that other people give you too, right? So when like the memory, like you said, of those people who saw you and really believed in you become a part of us. So when we go through hard times as adults, we can call on those people. And it's a beautiful legacy for those of us who work with kids.